I'm Kaya Chingoni, the poet on tour for the Out of Bounds project, and I'm here with Kim O'Loughlin and also with Louisa Adjua Parker. Where are we?
Borough Gardens in Dorchester.
Borough Gardens. I thought I'd kick us off with a question just to open it out, and then we could expand. I was thinking, travelling down here, there is not many people of colour that I saw, and I have that experience when I come to this part of the world. And I was wondering, for both of you, what has been the experience of living in a place where you don't see yourself reflected so often? And does that come into the writing? I guess it's in the poem that you read, but elsewhere in your writing as well.
Yeah, no, it totally comes into my writing. I think it's probably one of the main reasons I started writing, really, was to express my experiences of racism as a child, growing up in various parts of the country, but also down here. And because most of my friends were white, and I had lovely friends, but there was no way they could understand how I felt, so there's no way I could express that as a young woman. So that's really what drove me to start writing. And it's been a really mixed experience actually living here. It's a beautiful part of the world. I do love the West Country. I don't necessarily think I belong in a town as such, but I feel like I belong to the whole space. And I love the light, and I love the landscape, and I love the sea, and it's stunningly beautiful. But there's been lots of times where I felt like I'm in the wrong place. Like I should be in London or a city where there are people who look like me and who I can relate to in a different level. So it can feel quite lonely. When I see stuff going on, like literary events or stuff going on in London or elsewhere, I still feel a bit like, oh, what about me? I can't sort of necessarily join in with all these things, and it can feel like, it can be a bit lonely. But I feel as though recently I've created a bit more of a sort of community of writers. I know I've connected with more writers that live in other parts of Britain, and it feels less lonely. But there are times when you think, how do I make sense of being me and being the only black face when I walk into a room full of white people? And that happens to me over and over and over again. And I think when you're young, particularly, and trying to make sense of your identity, it's really, really tough. When you're growing up, you don't know what to do with your hair. So if you look different from your friends, and there's just nothing there that represents you in your sort of group of culture or the culture around you. So it can be really tough. But interesting, a rich experience, a rich and varied experience.
Well, I grew up in the 60s in Birmingham, and there were a few people that I could relate to there, but not very many, who were mixed. So I didn't seem a mature woman who looked like me. And I can remember looking at women at a certain age. I remember looking at women wondering if that's what I'd be when I grew up. And then in Exeter, years later, I walked past a cafe, and there was a little girl sitting in the cafe about 8. And as I walked past, her eyes just went big, and she just watched me walk past, and I just thought, that's me, that's what I was like. And there was a real great sense of satisfaction at being in the West Country, just for that little girl to see me walk past the window, because her experience was something like mine, I'm sure. Then, because at that time Exeter, there weren't a lot of people in Exeter that girl would have been able to look at and think, no, that was me. But I find being in the countryside anyway, and seeing black people in the countryside is not what we're used to. And what I find really interesting is that being brought up here, I have all those attitudes myself. So when I see a black person at the seaside, I notice them. Not because I relate to them necessarily, but because the visual of a black person in the countryside, a black person working on a farm or in an orchard, or it's not usual, we're not used to that. So I remember I do try to work through that I've got a poem I'm writing at the moment about my dad, and he's not here now, but I really wanted him to come to the West Country. I wanted him to show him my new home, because he was brought up on an island where we had the sea, and as far as I know, he never went to the sea in this country, and I really wanted him to come, and he never came. So I wrote a poem and brought him here in the poem. So, and I think you can do that. That's what I love about poetry. You can make things happen.
I feel sometimes that writing and poetry is almost this open space in which you can kind of live for want of a better word, because you can imagine whatever world you want to, and you can put whoever you want into it, and there's something powerful about that, I think. Yeah, and also you can put yourself in a place that you're not supposed to be. Like, I think we were talking earlier about like the canon and tradition, and I've noticed in both your writing there's a negotiation of that tradition through the rhyme and the meter and those kind of tropes. Yeah, I'm almost thinking that it's kind of being part of British poetry is sort of like walking into a room with only white people in it.
Yeah, similar experience to life down here.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
I think too, not just white people. I think people of a certain class, and that's another thing that's being addressed now in writing, where the working class voices. So that's interesting. I think we're in a really interesting time now when things can become more visible, but it's taken a long time.
And we've got a long way to go.
Yeah, it's taken a very. We were talking about these things when I was 16. We were talking about these things 40 years ago.
Yeah.
And so
It's
time.
not changed enough. It's changed a bit, but not enough.
Changed a bit. Hard to know how to do it, but I think poetry and writing is a really good way forward with it, because I think it can be really accessible because it's spoken and it can be heard, so it can be shared anywhere.
Yeah, and I try to write. I deliberately try, not deliberately, but I aim to write in a way that's accessible, and I prefer sort of simplistic sort of poems and writing generally that all people can relate to. I'm not particularly into using lots of big words or being overly academic with my writing, because I think that excludes a whole chunk of the population, and I didn't go through the usual route so far to become a writer. I didn't do an MA, I haven't done an MA, I didn't even do English at degree level, so I like the idea of literature being accessible to everybody, basically, a wide range of people, and I try to sort of think about that when I'm writing as well.
And I don't know if this is something that you both think about when you're writing, but is there a strong sense of a particular setting or place when you write poems, or is it more like a set of images that have lodged in your mind, or how does it work for you?
I think for me, I was looking through some poems to choose one to read, and I think a lot of my poems are quite sort of set in specific places. There are some that I couldn't set anywhere else, and some that could be that are sort of more, generic or universal. But I like the idea of drawing on the physical landscape around us to create part of the poem. And there is something particular about living in this part of the world that I hope I can express, through my work. Yeah, I think place is really, really important in writing, because you can write a good story or a good poem and not know necessarily where it is, but I think it's unusual. I think it really does need to be set in that place, and for you to know, have clues about the surroundings to really enjoy it.
I think sometimes as well you can use one place to project you into another place, because I have never been to the Caribbean, but I've got the stories from my father, and I've never been to Ireland, but I've got the stories from my grandparents about those places. I took a long time to visit them because I wanted to hold on to those worlds that I'd imagined as they were talking to me. I'd made the landscape up for myself. And when I finally went to Ireland, it wasn't disappointing, but now it's a real landscape. So I've lost that naivety or whatever it was I had. But I used to, obviously the jumping off point was England and my experience of the landscape here and the towns here and the places here. But I had these stories, so I'd weave the stories and the place I was familiar with and come up with some really interesting hybrids. So I think you can do that. So it's sort of what you were saying about put yourself in a place or put someone else in a place. And that the starting point is always somewhere real, isn't it? And in Birmingham, our little Victorian street and our front room and our back room, where I started and which I return to in my poetry, have all these echoes with the cottage that I lived in a little village, and the same things went on there. And then I can project that, then I have projected that in some of my writing to a house in the West Indies where my dad was brought up.
I've been really surprised travelling around for this project to notice how variable the landscape is in Britain. Just we went up to Shetland, and just how different the tide is, and all these little sounds that when you're kind of like looking around, when you pay attention to them, I just didn't realise. And then when we were at the beach just now in West Bay, there was like a really strong, like surging thing going on, and I think people from outside of the UK have this assumption about the landscape, just like maybe there are other assumptions of what people are like, and I think it's so broad.
It's really varied. I mean, you
Yeah.
can see on the train just from here to London, you can see how it changes, becomes lighter and paler and sort of flatter. You know, more and more buildings kind of gradually, fill the land up. So you can see it visibly changing. Just quite small areas, can't you?
Even the colours.
Yeah, the colours.
The colours of the.
The colours of the grass, and the earth change. So like Devon's got very, very rich, vibrant colours. We've got red earth, we've got bright green grass, and then Dorset gets a little bit more muted. And as you go up further, it just gets kind of paler
And the
paler.
colours in Cornwall are so different.
Yes,
aren't
of course. Yeah, Cornwall looks almost tropical. The beach looks quite tropical, don't they? Yeah,
they?
just
And the dark rocks on the beach.
Yeah, Cornwall's beautiful.
Also the colours people paint their houses as well.
Yes.
When they're in
Yeah.
a coastal place, they feel that gets a bit of sun, they feel a kind of permission to have those kind of more pastel seaside colours.
Yeah, Weymouth's got a bit of that, hasn't it? And Bristol's got quite these kind of
Yeah.
bright coloured houses.
And the local stone's quite different.
Yes,
The
of
hedges are
course,
very
yeah.
different. Hedges and walls, there's very few stone walls here, whereas if you go to Wales and further north, lots of stone walls.
In Somerset, you've got the nice yellow brick houses that they build out of local stone. I'm not sure what it's called, but anyway, they're lovely. So some, Bath and Bristol around that area.
So what lets you know that you're back in Dorchester, that you're back in that space? Is there a particular sound or a smell or a characteristic?
Oh, probably the seagulls for the general West Country. But I'm a bit of a strange person. I've lived in lots of different parts of the West Country, so I don't feel like Dorchester's my home at the moment. I lived in Lyme Regis for 18 years, and that probably felt more like home. I also lived in South Devon for, I can't remember how many years, 5 years. So for me, it's more of a wide space that I inhabit, so it's not just this is my town. But I think, the sound of seagulls is probably, a definite thing. It's like, yes, I'm back in the West Country. And they can be really annoying and really loud. Just like, oh, for God's sake. But that's the sound. Well, the sound of the sea, that was sort of swishing sound, The sound of the waves when they go up and down the beach, I love that. It's just so relaxing.
And do you have a characteristic sound?
A sound. I think it's a quietness actually that's here.
Even now there's a bit of traffic and that kind of thing, but I'm really struck by how if you listen you can kind of hear what they're saying over there, and it's very...
Yeah, it's very quiet compared to London. This is quite a quiet town actually. Bridport's probably a bit livelier because this town just goes completely quiet at night, really, apart from the weekend. You can walk through the high street and not see anyone really past 6 o'clock
I
somewhere.
think as well in Bridport in particular, you can see the fields and the woodlands. So there's a woodland on top of a hill, right, you can get to it just walking up the street opposite me. And you can see them. So you're always reminded that the countryside is just there. And that's what I really love about it. And that's a visual thing, really. But it does come with the quietness. You can be right in the middle of the town. It could be in the middle of a field somewhere almost. So yeah,
I like that feeling of being very close to the countryside.
yeah, it is.
It does feel nice. The air feels clean here, and it just feels sort of fresh. I feel a bit claustrophobic when I go to London, even though I love it and I love the experience. I love the fact that it's so multicultural. That's brilliant. But the feeling of actually being there with all the sort of dirty buildings, and I can feel quite hemmed in. People just rushing around really quickly, and down here we're a bit slower. Take things at a bit of a slower pace.
Yeah.
When I first moved out of the city, I was 17, I went up to Durham and I arrived at night time and went to someone's house, and the next morning we walked to the end of the road and we were on the side of a valley, and she said there's Eschwinning, which is another village, and I couldn't see it. It was a wall. because I'd been brought up. The only thing we ever did as children was drive between Birmingham and London. We never stood in the countryside. We never looked. No, never. We never looked across. I'd never been to the sea. So she was pointing to something across this valley, and I couldn't see anything, and it was a wall. And then suddenly it wasn't a wall, and I nearly fell over. It was suddenly landscape. Then it was a wall. Then it was landscape. Till I got used to it. So.
Yeah, wow, that's quite.
It's amazing, isn't it? Some people must have, they've been brought up in a city all their life, so their vision, they don't see beyond certain points. And I was 17 when that happened.
I think it's really sad when children don't get to see the countryside when they're little. I think it's such an important part of life, of being in this country.
I'm really.
I imagine.
I find it really funny that for some people a photograph has to have something in it.
Yes, a person.
Yeah.
Or
in order
building,
to make it,
to focus on,
to justify it or something. But I just love images of fields or landscape, or there's so much texture in there.
Yeah, definitely. You don't need somebody in it. They can just keep out of the way.
No, I'm afraid I'm a put person in the picture. I went through my husband's whole photo album saying rubbish, because they were just pictures of a plant.
Oh, maybe plants.
So I said, no, you like people. What's wrong with people?